So today in class, we're going to be learning about shadows, and more specifically, how shadows are formed. Obviously, in this picture, we have a couple of shadows being cast here, and you have to think about what's happening in this situation. We obviously have a light source, probably the sun, off in the distance down here. We have two people walking down the sidewalk, and we have their shadows going behind them. So the shadows are cast by their bodies. You have to think about what's happening with light all around on the surface around the shadow, it's very, very well lit. Inside the shadow, it's not very well lit. But we can't say all the light's being blocked by their bodies because I could still make out the bricks of the sidewalk right in their shadows. So that tells me that there is still light bouncing off those shadows, but it could be from other sources, like the same sunlight maybe reflecting off of a building or bouncing off of anything that could bounce it to this area, then to our working eyes. So when you really think about what creates a shadow, you have to think about some of the light being blocked on its pathway by an object, but other light being able to go past, and it ends up on a surface of a well-lit area where light is going past an object, and a less well-lit area where light is being blocked on its pathway to reaching that surface. Now, I've used that word surface several times, and you should come to realize that the surface is a big part of this. Without a surface for that shadow to be cast upon, you would not notice a shadow. Now, when it's time to draw and think about where a shadow would be, you have to think about the arrangement of the object compared to the light source and the surface itself. If you rearrange how the surface is set up or where the object that's blocking a light source, it could change the position and the size of the shadow. Now, with this little car in this position, obviously it would be blocking these straight rays of light, but these rays of light would be going to the surface. So at a minimum, we would have to look at the rays of light that would be getting blocked on their pathway. So our shadow would be about in this area, basically in between this ray of light and this ray of light. This is where the beginning of the well-lit area would begin, is where these two unblocked rays would be. So for your assignment today, you're going to be doing this exact slideshow, and you're going to be adding where these shadows should belong. So you have to look at where the rays of light would be unblocked going past our object, and which ones would be getting blocked on their pathway, and adjust the size of your shadow accordingly. Okay, and there's a few more questions where you have to compare the size of the shadow compared to the rays of light that are being blocked on their pathway on that surface. Now, eventually, you also have to think about where an object could be on in its position that would block enough of the light on its pathway to make a shadow this size, or if this would match up with the size of the shadow if all the rays are getting blocked. Would the shadow be larger? Would we be able to perceive that shadow? That's going to be an interesting question. Now, there's more information about casting double shadows. You have to look at two separate light sources and their individual pathways to a surface. Like this upper shadow is being actually cast by this blue light. This lower shadow is being cast by this more orange colored rays of light. If you look at the individual pathways of those orange rays of light, you could tell where that shadow would be located because these three rays we've blocked on our pathway. To create this upper shadow, these three rays would be blocked on their pathways as well, but the other rays would be going past, making the well-lit areas. When you also think about this, the shadows aren't as dark as they would be in the previous slides because there is light coming from this light source filling in this shadow. So they would be very light shadows of just one of the two sources of light being blocked, but this is also creating two separate light shadows. On this one, you would have to follow the rays of light where they're getting blocked on the pathways and know where our shadows would be. And there's going to be two different shadows you would have to draw on this slide and this one. And this kind of explains how you could have a darker area in a shadow if basically the two different light sources, both the rays of light from both light sources being blocked from reaching this area. But for this one, only the blue light rays are being blocked on their pathways to reaching the surface, and it's lighter because these orange colored rays of light are reaching that area. And same thing with the bottom ones. You have a clear pathway for the blue rays of light to hit the spot, but the orange rays of light are being blocked on the pathway to getting this area. So for today's assignment, you're going to be going through this exact same slideshow and figuring out where your different shadows would be and the appropriate size of those shadows. Eventually, you'll also be doing an assignment much like this. We have to arrange our rays of light to create a shadow. So you have to think about the position of your object. It has to be in between your light source and that surface. And arrange your rays of light so that they could go past the object and would represent unblocked pathways to the well-lit white areas on that surface. Like that. And also, to create a shadow, that darker area has to be done by some light being blocked on its pathway, making an area of well-lit surface and areas of less well-lit surface. And you would be able to do the same thing with good old Wanda and her bat. So you'd have to arrange the bat in between the light source and the surface, arrange your raise the light. You can even change the angle of these to best match what's happening in the scene. So some of the light must be getting past the bat to make the well-lit area on the ground. Some of the light is getting blocked in its pathway to that surface. And to also explain how Wanda would see that bat. All right. Hope you guys have a good day, and I hope to see you very soon at school.